This is Larry Jordan, the host of the Digital Production Buzz. The following interview is an excerpt from a recent program. To hear the entire program, visit digitalproductionbuzz.com. Maxim Jago is a film director, a screenwriter, and an author who splits his time between filmmaking and speaking as a futurist. He's a regular speaker at media technology conferences, film festivals, and events that celebrate creativity. He's also the innovation officer at filmdo.com and a mentor for new filmmakers. Hello, Maxim. Welcome.
Hello. How are you?
Hello, Maxim.
We are doing great. You know, I was just reflecting that you travel the world as an expert on behalf of companies like Adobe. So my first question is, where in the world are you today?
That's a good question.
Where am I?
Right now, I'm in Athens, Georgia. I've just been speaking at the Georgia University, at the Grady College, giving some presentations to the students here about, if you like, more like the philosophy of film, some communication techniques, networking tips, so when they graduate, they can meet people and give more than they take. And just speaking about the techniques I've learned over the course of making the 50 or so films that I've worked on. So it's been a pleasure. And just before that, as you heard there, I was with Dan Berube at the Editor's Retreat, which in Daytona, which was wonderful. And before that, I've relocated to New York now, so I'm having my Englishman in New York experience. I have an apartment a couple of blocks from Times Square, which is great. Wow. So I had about 4 days at home, and before that, of course, was Sundance. And Dan and I shared a room. It's very difficult to get accommodation during Sundance. It's easy to get stuff out of town, but difficult to get it in walking distance. We managed to get a twin room that was just perfect. Not the Ritz, but it did let us participate in the festival. And then I think before that, I was in New York briefly. And before that, I had a trip that was, I was speaking at the Dubai Festival. And I was
You
in
can
London.
stop now. I'm getting tired just listening to the itinerary.
Quite frankly, I want to be,
I don't have a time zone
Maxim. I want to go to those places. I want to go to Dubai. I want to go to Sundance.
Oh, you want to go to Iceland? Go to Iceland.
Oh, I'd love to do that.
The official photographer for the tourist board there, a guy called Ragnar, and he'll take you around. It's beautiful.
What was it that got you interested in technology in the first place? I mean, you specialize in trying to figure out what's happening in the future, but what was it that caught your eye back when you were so young?
Well, when I was a child, that's a great question. When I was a child, I was raised by intellectual hippies. It's a bit like being raised by wolves, but with more intellectual debate. And I remember my mother, she would go to what we call in the UK jumble sales. I don't know what you call them here, you know, people selling bric-a-brac and junk and stuff. And she would give my brother and I all kinds of toys, and we would take them all to pieces. It would be a birthday present to give me an old gas meter and a wrench and a couple of screwdrivers to take it to pieces. And I just it's a kind of obsession to understand how things work. In fact, when I got to 11, with some hubris, I think, I sort of figured, well, I think I kind of understand technology now. I want to understand everything else. And I read a beautiful book by an American author called Richard Bach. He's famous for writing Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Mm-hmm. And all the hippies were reading it at that time.
Sorry, what's that?
I said all the hippies were reading it at that time.
Yes. Well, I read it, and I was so excited to have found another human being that was asking these questions about why are we here and what do we know and what is reality. And in the book, he draws this beautiful analogy between reality and film. He says that choosing to be born is a bit like choosing to go to the cinema, where all kinds of experiences happen, and if souls exist, then they know that it's fake, but of course the characters on the screen don't, and they're really having the experience. And I was so moved by this, his description of reality as a kind of illusion and the parallel with film. It's one of the major reasons I became a filmmaker. And I began studying life at the university and everything. I wanted to understand everything, basically. And what I've concluded is the older I get, the more I realize I have no idea. I think Socrates was right. We're all winging it. But as long as we can get along, we can have fun along the way.
Did you ever, at any time, I know you like to tell your stories visually, but do you ever try to write a book?
Yeah, I did actually. I wrote a novella, which is the rewrite is in the works. I have about 50 projects.
Yeah, sure.
I had this rationalization of my projects a few years ago, where I looked at how long I thought I was likely to live and just struck some things off the list because I realized that life is short. And I think that, you get those bits of advice when you're a kid and you realize that they're right when you're older. And it kind of makes you grumpy because you wish you'd realized it sooner. And one of the bits of advice I heard was that the secret of life is to find out what you love and to do that. And you'll always find a way to make money. You'll always sustain yourself if you really love whatever it is. My obsession, my catnip is communication. But I love philosophy. I'm writing a metaphysics PhD, which is killing me. It's going to take forever.
Are you serious?
But,
really? Wow.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So I'm looking at, so it's The Nature of Being is the broad title. It's an old title. But I'm looking at reverse. So the basic argument of the PhD is that we're either here by chance, in which case nothing matters, or we're here for some kind of reason, in which case there is potentially a design. And so it becomes meaningful to reverse engineer life. And so I reverse engineer consciousness, I reverse engineer space and time, and I conclude that we should get on with it. Because clearly, if there is a design, not knowing what we're here for is part of the design, because nobody really knows. So we should stop worrying about it. Instead of having existential angst where we worry about whether we're going to do it wrong, we should have existential joy because, if a client gives you a terrible brief, it's not your fault.
I tend to wonder why I'm here.
Well, exactly. But nobody really knows. So stop worrying about it and get on with it. That's the gist of the metaphysics PhD. Obviously, it's worth
pretty soon, Dr. Jago. Dr. Jago.
Oh,
that'd be fun.
The thing is, I don't. Who needs a PhD? But wouldn't it be cool to have directed by Dr. Jago?
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of common potential.
There's your motivation. That's
girls.
The motivation right there.
I can maybe tell girls at parties that I have healing hands. You don't know.
And it looks great. It looks great on your business card.
yeah, exactly.
I want to move you to Florida and the editors' retreat. What were you sharing with the editors? What did you want them to start thinking about?
Let me see. Oh, okay, yeah. So I gave a couple of talks there that were really interesting. Canaan Flowers was sorely missed. Dan was there. We had some real greats there. One of the talks I gave was just a straight up masterclass on Premiere Pro. So I write the cost in a book for Premiere Pro. I record the official training for it. So I'm supposed to know what I'm talking about. And I think increasingly Premiere Pro is becoming a bit like Photoshop in that. Apparently they have an interview question at Adobe for the Photoshop team where they say, do you think you totally know Photoshop? And if you say yes, you fail. Because nobody totally knows Photoshop. And Premiere Pro is definitely moving in that direction. But I showed some of the really advanced techniques, some of the stuff that particularly people who've self-trained might have missed, just things that might have bugged you about the application that you just didn't realize there was a tick box that made it perfect. And some more advanced compositing features and project browsing, that kind of thing. But for me, the really interesting presentation that I gave was about communication. My passion, my absolute passion is communication. And I've spent many years studying it informally. So I gave a presentation about really advanced techniques for achieving the maximum transfer of understanding from one brain to another, but also dealing with conflict. So there's an amazing book that I think should be required reading at school called Nonviolent Communication. I think it might be a guy called Marshall Rosenberg. I might have that wrong. And it's about conveying information without adding judgment. And it turns out that we do this all the time. And so
wait, just say that again. Conveying information without adding judgment. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. So without me telling you what you are, or without me telling you why you did something. So the classic example for conflict management would be, we're having a discussion and you start shouting. Now, I could say you're being aggressive, but then I'm telling you who you are. I'm telling you what you are. And that's bound to annoy you. That's not going to help. But if I say, it's making it difficult for me to think because you've raised your voice, I'm not saying why you've raised your voice. I'm not saying what I think about you raising your voice. I'm describing my personal experience and something that is probably not in dispute, that you're shouting. So it took me about 3 months actually to adjust the way I communicate. And, you slip up sometimes. But the gist of it is that the guy says positive or negative judgment will elicit a negative response. So now that we've got that clear, it's up to you. If you want to have a bad reaction from people, go ahead. But if you don't, here are some approaches to how to avoid it. So I was talking about that kind of thing. It's just invaluable, particularly because, we're working in a world that's very heavily orientated towards teamwork. One of the reasons I love making films is that it's not all about me. It's about the relationships I have with the other creatives that I'm working with. For me, this is fantastic. It's all about the connections between us as people. So being able to communicate better is quite fundamental. And you see that, I don't know if Kanan's ever told you about his whole distributed creative process. He has these teams all around the world, and somehow he's created a system where people in different cultures and different time zones can all work together. This is a big deal, and I think we're going to see more and more of it, especially with things coming online like the Oculus Rift very soon. I'm very interested in 360 video and VR. You guys were talking with Dan about that. It is a very exciting time for that. And I'm developing a project that I'm hoping maybe we can work with Ted Chilowitz, you mentioned.
Right.
We're hoping to shoot something in June.
Well, even big budget movies now, we talk about Kanan assembling this worldwide group of people, but even big studio movies have assembled worldwide. They just go into a studio with a big screen and a lot of Skype feeds, and one person over here is doing color, one is the sound, and they can be on the stage with the composer, and that nobody's together anymore. They're spread out all over the world, and that's
amazing.
Yeah.
But there's a problem with it,
There is a problem.
Issues,
yes.
really. One issue is that it's crucial that we remember that we're the storytellers, and I think that sometimes, especially working as a technologist, we forget that, in the old days it would be a bard in an inn somewhere with a lute, and they would use the music of the lute to enhance the experience of the storytelling for the audience. And I think as filmmakers, we are essentially storytellers, and it's crucial that we remember that. You were talking there briefly with Kanan about, are we looking at 10K? I think we're going to top out in terms of a distribution format. I think we'll top out at 8K. And the reason is because of our physical size and the size of the walls in our environment. There's really no point going beyond 8K. It would be retina. But obviously for acquisition, we'll go higher. But who cares, ultimately? Jeff Greenberg gave a great presentation at the retreat where he was showing uncompressed 10-bit 1080, which was something like 2 gig for this piece of video, and then a 1.6 meg H.265 compressed file that on the projection screen, to be honest, it was pretty indistinguishable. It looked pretty much the same. And nobody cares about the picture quality. They care a bit more about the sound quality. What they care about is a story that's compelling, about a performance that's authentic, about stakes that matter to us, so that we can engage with the story and feel something about it. Yeah. And I think this is something that Hollywood struggles with.
Yeah, I think
and the other thing is fidelity.
Let me play devil's advocate just for a second. I agree that if you don't have a compelling story, people aren't going to watch your film. But there is a point where the technology can make the story more believable or less believable bring you into or out of the story. So it seems to me that there has to be a balance between the creative storytelling and the understanding of the technology to tell the story properly, so the audience doesn't say, oh, they're in a green screen, I don't believe it anymore, and they tune out. Would you disagree?
I 100% agree. No, I 100% agree. I think, though, that, I often get asked, weirdly enough, I often get asked what I think is the best camera. I have great relationships with the major camera manufacturers. I haven't seen a bad picture from a camera for 10 or 15 years. So I agree with you 100% that there comes a point where the technology becomes a hindrance. Mm-hmm. I'm working on my first feature film now, and the sequel to the film is a game that will be released the same day as the film. And the idea is you go to the cinema, you see the film, and we're going to rebuild the world of the film in the game. And we're going to have support for the Oculus Rift and maybe some other VR technologies in the game. So the idea is that you cross the fourth wall instead of the characters crossing the fourth wall. You go into the world of the film and experience it. Now, I agree with you about that level of fidelity where the technology is not a hindrance for the audience. 100% agree. But for me, what's interesting is invisible filmmaking. I want to create an authentic experience for the audience by whatever mechanism. Now, I had a go with pretty much every VR technology available. The new holographic technology from Microsoft, unfortunately, I didn't try, but I've heard it's amazing. Yeah. But for me, a lot of people are talking about, and I do think this is the first genuinely new medium that we've had for years and years. Everyone's talking about the fact that things can go on in every direction. So you can stage performances and you can decide whether or not something happens based on where the person's looking. So the narrative can go in different directions. And that's very powerful. But frankly, it's a little bit annoying looking over your shoulder all the time, wondering what's behind you. It's not that convenient. It's going to be great for games. But what blew me away about particularly the Oculus Rift, which has a very, very fast response time, there's a very low lag. And what blew me away about it is that we have a thing called proprioception, which is the brain's awareness of the body when you're not looking at it. So you know where your arms are, even if you're not looking at them, because of proprioception. And it's partly to do with your relationship with your environment. Now, when you're looking at a person, your vision is actually moving the whole time, very slightly. You're breathing, you're leaning, you shift position in your chair, you notice something over the shoulder of the person that you're talking to, and your gaze moves very slightly all the time. And of course, when you're using the Oculus Rift, that's what happens. As you move your head and tilt it and adjust it, you get that instant feedback that feels like you really are there. It's incredibly immersive. So the thing I found the most compelling wasn't the every direction thing, and I'm looking forward to the sports, and I'm a gamer, I'm looking forward to the games. It was the fact that I really felt I was present with the person that was speaking to me. And what made that feeling of presence was just that the picture could wobble in accordance with the proprioception I have of my own head. It's very exciting.
Sorry, I was just taking notes. It's just...
I am. I'm very excited about this technology. I don't know where it's going to go. Nobody does.
But let me tell you the most exciting thing about it. It's $300.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in the really big and the really small. For me, the stuff in the middle is kind of logistics. This, for me, is the really small. This is consumer technology. It's $300 for the most expensive, best virtual reality hardware you can get. Google are heavily into it. I was chatting to Trevor, who's leading the virtual reality for Google. Very interesting guy. Guys at Samsung. These people are developing art projects. But the most expensive version you can get is $300. Super high resolution, super responsive. Very accurate tracking of your movements. Think about the consequences. There's a couple of ways that you can shoot video for this. One way is that you can have a 360 camera. So it's 16, maybe 22 cameras, and you stitch the images together. Another way that you do it is you use lasers to measure the environment, and you take the textures as if you can do high resolution video, or you can do it as stills, and you create the environment photorealistically in three-dimensional space, and then you allow the viewer to navigate the environment. It becomes immersive theater. So I'm working on a project right now where it's a film based on a play my father wrote. He was a playwright and a poet, and he actually died before he finished converting a one-act play for me into a screenplay. And he hated the rewrite. The play's called The Garden, but he started calling it The Awfulness because he couldn't face doing the rewrite. But it's about a garden, an underground garden, and the entire garden's fake. And there's an 18-year-old blind girl in the garden who's never been able to see. She doesn't know that seeing is even a thing, and she doesn't know that the garden's fake. And the entire thing is a setup. And she's coming of age and she's starting to ask questions. She's taken care of by a nurse who pretends to be blind but isn't. And her father visits. He pretends to be blind but isn't. And it turns into a thriller. It's a beautiful one-act play. And my plan is that we'll take over a warehouse in New York, maybe in Brooklyn. We'll have a week of building up the set. We'll spend half the budget on the set. The grass is made of plastic. The flowers are made of cloth. But it doesn't matter because she's blind. She can't see. So we can see the lights and the walls. It doesn't matter. We'll shoot it for 2 weeks as theatre. So we'll just run through it twice a day for 10 days. And then, for the third week of production, we'll invite audiences in for a truly immersive theatre. But part of the performance will be 360 video. So it'll be a film where we've shot the film, and then live audiences will be able to come into the set and watch the play. And it'll be the same actors, the same environment, the same story. I don't think that's ever been done. But we'll also do that for a 360 camera, and we'll allow people to view it like that.
I want to be there.
Maxim, where can people go on the web to learn more about your thinking and the projects you're working on?
Sometimes I feel like I should make a website called something like confusedenglishman.com. My main website is just my name, just maximjago.com.
That's all one word.
If you Google around, all one word, maximjago.com. I also have quite a lot of videos on Adobe TV, 23 courses on lynda.com.
You can stop now. We're already depressed. You can just, Maxim.
And I want to go to Iceland.
That website is MAX.
Go to Iceland. We'll go together.
Oh, absolutely.
MAXIMJAGO, MaximJago.com. Maxim, it's a delight chatting with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And good luck on your communication skills.
Yeah,
take care.
It's spouses, not hands, but let's get to that later. Thank you. Thank you very much, guys.
Take care.